Hey, my name's Ethan Miller. I'm 27 years old, and for the past 3 years, I've been running this small family farm all by myself out in Scottsbluff, western Nebraska. It's not much, just a few hundred acres of corn, wheat, and some cattle. The land's been in my family for generations, passed down from my grandparents to my parents, and then to me after they died in a car accident back in 2022. That crash took everything from me in one night: my folks, my sense of direction, and any real plans I had for the future. I was 24 at the time, fresh out of community college with a degree in agricultural management that suddenly felt useless. But I stuck around. What else was I going to do? Sell the place and move to some city where I'd be just another face in the crowd? No. This farm is all I have left of them. It's not glamorous. Waking up at dawn to feed the animals, fixing fences that the wind keeps knocking down. I don't have debts piling up, but I'm not rolling in money either. It's a quiet life, self-sufficient in its own way. Most days it's just me, the fields, and the endless Nebraska sky. The temperature was pushing 80 degrees, unseasonably warm for spring, and the air had that dry, dusty feel that comes after a long winter. I was out by the barn, tinkering with an old tractor engine that had been giving me trouble. Sweat was dripping down my back, and I had grease smeared across my hands and forearms. The radio was playing some classic country station faintly in the background, Johnny Cash or something like that. I wasn't paying much attention until I heard the crunch of tires on the gravel driveway. Visitors aren't common out here. The farm's a bit off the main road. Most folks who stop by are delivery drivers or the occasional neighbor borrowing tools. I wiped my hands on a rag and walked toward the gate, squinting against the sun. A sleek black SUV was pulling up, definitely not local. It looked expensive, like something out of Omaha or even Denver, with tinted windows and polished rims that hadn't seen a dirt road in their life. The door opened, and out stepped a woman. She was tall, maybe 5 feet 9 inches, with straight auburn hair tied back in a simple ponytail. She wore a tailored blazer over a white blouse, slim pants, and heels that were already sinking slightly into the soft ground. But what struck me wasn't her clothes. It was the way she carried herself. Confident, but there was something off. Her hands trembled just a bit as she adjusted her bag and her eyes. Mud was splattered on her shoes, as if she'd walked through a field before driving here. She spotted me and walked over, her steps deliberate but unsteady. "Are you Ethan Miller?" she asked, her voice steady despite the slight quiver in her hands. I nodded, crossing my arms. "That's me. Can I help you with something?" She took a deep breath, glancing around the farm as if sizing it up, then met my eyes directly. "My name is Claire Whitmore. I need a husband by tomorrow. If I don't get married, I lose everything." I stood there, frozen for a second, the rag still dangling from my hand. It sounded like a joke, or maybe a scam. Some city woman showing up at a random farm with a line like that, but her expression was dead serious. No hint of a smile. "Excuse me?" I finally said, wiping my forehead with the back of my arm. "You need what?" She didn't flinch. Instead, she pulled out a folder from her bag and handed it to me. "I'm the heir to Whitmore Group, the agricultural conglomerate based out of Lincoln. My grandfather's will stipulates that, to retain control of the company, I have to be married by my 29th birthday, which is tomorrow. If I don't, the controlling interest goes to my cousin, Ryan Whitmore." I flipped through the papers quickly. Legal documents, a copy of the will, news clippings about Whitmore Group. It was real. The company was huge. They controlled massive farmlands, supply chains for seeds and equipment, even some biotech divisions for sustainable farming. I'd heard of them. Their operations bordered some of the land around here. "Why me?" I asked, handing the folder back. "You don't even know me." She hesitated, her fingers tightening on the strap of her bag. "Your farm is adjacent to one of our properties. I've done my research. You're independent. No ties to the industry elite. And from what I can tell, you're not the type to be bought off. Plus, you're not involved in any scandals. My ex-fiancé backed out last week. He wanted me to cut corners on some deals, financial stuff that would have hurt small farmers like you." I refused, and he walked. Now Ryan's circling like a vulture. He's the one who'll turn the company into a machine that crushes independence. My grandfather trusted me to keep it ethical, focused on sustainability. I leaned against the fence post, processing it all. Ryan Whitmore. I'd heard rumors about him. He was the type who'd buy out small farms at rock-bottom prices. Forced consolidations that left folks like me high and dry. My parents had fought against types like him their whole lives. Claire's grandfather, from what I'd read in old articles, had been different. A man who believed in fair practices. And here she was, standing in my driveway, asking for a lifeline. It wasn't about money for me. She hadn't even offered any yet. But the thought of Ryan taking over? That could mean trouble for every small operation in the region, including mine. What exactly are you proposing? I asked. A marriage on paper, she said. We register tomorrow. Make it legal. I'll handle the rest. Lawyers, PR. You get compensated, of course. And if it doesn't work, we annul it quietly after I secure the board. I shook my head. I'm not in this for cash, but if we're doing this, no lies. And if it turns into something real, it's because we choose it, not because of some will. She looked surprised, then nodded. Deal. We shook hands, her palm cool against my calloused one. The next morning, we drove to the county courthouse in Scottsbluff. It was quick. A civil ceremony with her lawyer and my neighbor as witnesses. No rings, no vows beyond the legal minimum. As we signed the papers, I glanced at her. She looked relieved, but there was a shadow in her eyes. This wasn't how anyone pictured starting a marriage, but it was done. Claire Whitmore was now my wife, at least on paper. Little did I know, that was just the beginning. After the courthouse, things moved fast. Faster than I was ready for. Claire's lawyer had everything arranged. The marriage certificate was filed electronically within hours. And by evening, her team was already drafting statements for the Whitmore Group Board to confirm her compliance with the will. We drove back to the farm in her SUV, the silence between us thick but not uncomfortable. She stared out the window at the rolling fields, her fingers tapping lightly on the steering wheel. I appreciate this, Ethan, she said finally. More than you know, I shrugged, keeping my eyes on the road ahead. Just holding up my end. But we need ground rules if this is going to work. She nodded. Agreed. That night, Claire didn't stay. She headed back to her place in Lincoln to pack essentials and tie up loose ends at the office. But the next morning, she showed up with a couple of suitcases and a determined look on her face. Ryan's already making moves, she explained as I helped carry her things inside. He's hired investigators to dig into the marriage. If it looks fake, he'll challenge it in court. I need to be here full-time to make it convincing. I showed her to the guest room, my parents' old bedroom, which I'd kept mostly untouched except for fresh sheets and a quick dust. It felt strange having someone else in the house after 3 years of solitude. The farm wasn't set up for company, creaky floors, a kitchen with mismatched cabinets, and no high-speed internet beyond what my satellite dish could manage. Claire didn't complain. She unpacked methodically, hanging her blazers in the closet next to my flannel shirts like it was the most normal thing in the world. The first few days were awkward, like two strangers thrown into a play without rehearsing their lines. Our lives couldn't have been more different. I was up at 5 a.m. every morning, pulling on my boots and heading out to the barn to feed the cattle and check the irrigation lines. The air was crisp, the kind that bites at your cheeks until the sun climbs higher. Claire, on the other hand, started her day around 7, brewing coffee in my ancient percolator before diving into video calls with lawyers and shareholders. I'd hear her voice echoing from the living room. Professional, assertive. Has she negotiated contracts or reviewed financial reports? By noon, I'd come in for a quick sandwich, covered in dust and smelling like hay, while she paced with her earbuds in, discussing crop yields and sustainability initiatives. We barely spoke beyond necessities. Coffee's ready, or the Wi-Fi's spotty out here. Might need a booster. But Claire wasn't one to sit idle. On the third day, she surprised me by joining me outside. I was mending a section of fence that a storm had loosened, hammering nails into the posts under the relentless sun. She appeared in jeans and a simple t-shirt, still looking out of place but trying, carrying a thermos of water. Mind if I help? She asked. I handed her a pair of gloves, skeptical. You ever fixed a fence before? She shook her head. No, but I can learn. She held the wire steady while I twisted it, asked questions about the soil and why I rotated crops the way I did. It wasn't perfect. She pricked her finger once and cursed under her breath, but she didn't quit. That evening, she even tried cooking, burned the eggs a bit, but we laughed about it over dinner. It was the first real conversation we'd had since the wedding. She talked about her grandfather's vision for the company, how he wanted to protect small farms from corporate takeovers, and I shared stories about my parents' struggles during the droughts of the early 2000s. The pressure started building soon after. Ryan didn't waste time. A week in, Claire got a call from her lawyer. Ryan had filed a petition questioning the validity of our marriage, claiming it was a sham to circumvent the will. He'd even leaked hints to the financial press. Articles popped up online with headlines like Whitmore heirs hasty wedding love or loophole. They painted me as some opportunistic farmer looking for a payday, digging into my background, my parents' accident, even the farm's modest tax records. It stung, but I ignored it. Claire, though, was furious. "He's hiring PIs," she said one night, slamming her laptop shut. "They're watching us. We have to make this look real." That's when the acting began. We started going into town together. Grocery runs at the local market where I'd put my arm around her waist casually, or she'd lean her head on my shoulder while we waited in line. At home, we shared meals, watched the sunset from the porch, even held hands when a suspicious car drove by slowly one evening. It was all for show, or so I told myself. The real kicker came when the independent auditor showed up unannounced, sent by the board at Ryan's insistence. He was a stiff guy in a suit, clipboard in hand, asking pointed questions. "How long have you known each other? Do you share finances? Sleep in the same room?" We answered carefully. No lies, as I'd insisted, but it felt invasive. Claire handled it smoothly, showing him around the house, pointing out her clothes in the closet, our shared calendar on the fridge. After he left, she sank into a chair, exhausted. "This is humiliating," she muttered. I sat across from her, pouring us both some water. "We'll get through it." That night, as I lay in bed listening to the wind rattle the windows, I realized something shifting. Claire wasn't just playing a role anymore. She'd started helping with the chores without me asking, feeding the chickens in the morning, even learning to drive my old pickup to run errands. It wasn't for the auditors. It was genuine. She was trying to fit into this life, not just endure it. And for the first time, I wondered if I was starting to do the same with hers. As the weeks turned into a month, the line between pretense and reality started to blur in ways I hadn't anticipated. Claire and I had settled into a rhythm on the farm. Fragile but functional, she'd taken to the chores with a quiet determination, her city polish giving way to calloused hands and sun-kissed skin. Mornings found her in the kitchen, experimenting with my old cast-iron skillet, turning simple eggs and bacon into something almost gourmet. Afternoons, she'd join me in the fields, asking about crop rotations or helping load hay bales onto the truck. It wasn't perfect. We'd argue over small things like her habit of leaving conference calls on speaker or my reluctance to upgrade the ancient plumbing, but those moments felt real, not scripted for some auditor's report. Still, Ryan's shadow loomed larger every day, turning our fragile peace into a battlefield. It started subtly. One morning, I woke to find the irrigation system sabotaged, pipes sliced clean through in the backfield, water flooding the rows of young corn I'd just planted. It wasn't an accident. The cuts were precise, like someone with a knife had snuck in under cover of night. I spent the day knee-deep in mud, patching what I could. But the damage was done. Half the crop was waterlogged, probably ruined. Claire found me out there at dusk, drenched and exhausted. "Ethan, what happened?" she asked, her voice tight with concern. I told her about the pipes and her face hardened. "Ryan, it has to be. He's escalating." By then, the rumors had started circulating too. Whispers in town. Online forums for local farmers claiming I'd been paid off to marry her, that I was just a pawn in some corporate game. One article even dug up old photos of my parents' accident, twisting it into a sob story about a desperate man latching onto wealth. It made my blood boil, but I kept my head down, focusing on the farm. Claire didn't let it slide. She confronted the press head-on, issuing a statement through her team that defended our marriage as genuine. Born from shared values in agriculture, Ethan Miller represents the heart of what Whitmore Group stands for, she said. In one interview, I overheard on her phone. It was the first time she'd publicly tied her world to mine, and it hit me harder than expected. But Ryan wasn't done. He sent fabricated evidence to the board, doctored emails suggesting our wedding was a paid arrangement, complete with fake bank transfers. Her lawyer fought it off, but the stress was wearing on her. I'd catch her staring out the window at night, her fingers tracing patterns on the glass, lost in thought. The real breaking point came on a stormy Thursday evening in early May. The sky had been darkening all day, thunder rumbling in the distance like a warning. I was securing the barn doors when I smelled smoke, sharp and acrid, cutting through the rain-scented air. I ran toward the storage shed at the edge of the property, my heart pounding. Flames were licking up the sides, the dry wood crackling as fire spread fast despite the drizzle starting to fall. Inside were tools, seeds, fertilizers, everything I needed for the season. I grabbed the fire extinguisher from the truck and charged in, spraying foam wildly, coughing through the smoke. The heat was intense, singeing my arms, but I managed to douse the main blaze, dragging out what I could salvage. By the time the fire department arrived, called by Claire, who'd seen the glow from the house, I was collapsed against the shed wall, soaked in sweat and rain, my hands blistered and my lungs burning. We'd lost most of the stored seeds and equipment. The upcoming planting would be a disaster, setting me back months financially. Claire rushed over as the firefighters wrapped up, her face pale under the flashing lights. "Ethan! Oh God! Are you okay?" She knelt beside me, ignoring the mud, and gently took my hands, examining the burns. "We need to get you inside." I tried to wave her off, muttering something about handling it, but she wouldn't hear it. She helped me to my feet and guided me back to the house, where she sat me at the kitchen table and fetched the first aid kit. Her movements were careful, almost tender, as she cleaned the wounds and applied ointment, wrapping gauze around my palms. Tears welled in her eyes as she worked. "This is my fault," she whispered. "Ryan did this to hurt me. But you're the one paying for it." I shook my head. "It's not on you. He's the coward." But seeing her like that, vulnerable, guilty, cracked something in me. For the first time, I reached out, brushing a tear from her cheek. "We'll fix it. Together." From that night on, things shifted. Claire threw herself into helping rebuild. She used her personal funds, not the company's, to order new equipment and seeds, making sure everything was above board with receipts and no strings attached. She stood by me at the insurance meetings, arguing with adjusters when they tried to lowball the claim. And she faced the media storm, holding a press conference where she called out Ryan's tactics without naming him directly, emphasizing how attacks like this threatened independent farmers everywhere. It was brave, and it made me see her, not as the heiress who dragged me into this, but as someone fighting for what was right, just like my parents had. We started opening up more in the quiet evenings. She'd tell me about her lonely childhood in a mansion full of staff but no real family, how her grandfather was the only one who saw her potential. I'd share memories of hayrides with my folks, the way the farm had been our sanctuary. Those talks built a bridge between our worlds, one story at a time. The tension peaked during a massive storm a week later. Power went out across the county, leaving us in darkness with only candles and a battery radio for company. Wind howled outside, rain lashing the windows like it wanted to break in. We sat on the living room floor, wrapped in blankets, the fire in the hearth casting flickering shadows. Claire was unusually quiet, staring into the flames. "What if we lose?" she said softly. "The board, the company, everything." I turned to her, the words spilling out before I could stop them. This stopped being a deal for me. I don't know when, but it did. She looked at me, her eyes wide in the firelight. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. Then, slowly, she reached for my hand, her fingers intertwining with mine. It wasn't for show. It was real. The storm from that night had barely cleared when Ryan made his final push. It came in the form of an emergency board summons, delivered via certified mail the next morning. Claire's lawyer called her at dawn, his voice urgent over the speakerphone as I brewed coffee in the kitchen. "He's forcing a verification hearing in 48 hours, the lawyer said. "If they rule it fraudulent, you lose control of Whitmore Group immediately. And Ethan? He could face charges for financial collusion." Claire paced the living room, her face ashen. I handed her a mug, trying to steady her with a touch on her arm. "What does that mean exactly?" I asked. She explained, "The board, influenced by Ryan's allies, would grill us on every detail: finances, living arrangements, even our personal interactions. Proof of deceit would strip her of her inheritance rights, handing the reins to Ryan. For me, it could mean lawsuits, liens on the farm, maybe even jail time if they twisted it into fraud. The next 2 days were a whirlwind of preparation. Claire's team worked around the clock, gathering affidavits from neighbors who'd seen us together, bank statements showing no suspicious transfers, even photos from our grocery runs. But the real battle was internal. Claire wrestled with the decision: admit our feelings had grown real, risking the board seeing her as emotional and unfit, or stick to the arrangement story and keep distance to protect her position. That night, as we sat on the porch watching fireflies dance in the fields, I couldn't hold back. "Claire, I won't be your shield if you don't choose me," I said, my voice low but firm. "But if you do, I'm not walking away." She turned to me, her eyes searching mine in the dim light. "Not of losing the company, of losing you if this blows up." We didn't sleep much after that, holding each other in the guest room that had become ours, whispering plans and fears until dawn. The hearing was held via video conference from a neutral office in Lincoln. Claire insisted on driving there alone to keep me out of the direct line of fire. But I refused. "We're in this together," I told her as we pulled into the parking lot. The boardroom feed showed a dozen stern faces, Ryan smirking from his seat like he'd already won. He presented his case first. "This so-called marriage is a farce. Ethan Miller is a nobody farmer she picked up to game the will. Look at the timeline. Engaged and married in under 24 hours. No shared assets. No history. It's collusion, plain and simple." His lawyer flashed documents, our quick courthouse filing. My farm's modest valuation contrasted with Whitmore's billions. The board murmured, questions flying. "Miss Whitmore, explain your relationship. Is this love or convenience?" Claire stood tall, her voice steady as she addressed the camera. "It started as a necessity. Yes, to honor my grandfather's wishes and protect the company from those who'd exploit it." Ryan leaned forward, triumphant, but she wasn't done. "But it's become more. Ethan isn't a pawn. He's the man who showed me what real partnership looks like. He didn't marry me for money or power. He did it because he believes in the same values my grandfather did. Fairness for small farmers, sustainability over greed, and somewhere along the way, I fell in love with him. Not because of the will, not for the board's approval, but because he's the one person who sees me as Claire, not the heiress." The room fell silent. I squeezed her hand under the table, my heart racing. Ryan exploded. "This is emotional manipulation. She's unfit." But Claire's lawyer interrupted, projecting new evidence on the shared screen. "Before you decide, consider this. Hidden camera footage from my farm's perimeter, installed after the irrigation sabotage, showed a shadowy figure sneaking onto the property the night of the fire, dousing the shed with accelerant. Enhanced audio captured a voice. Ryan's muttering about ending this charade. Bank records followed. Transfers from Ryan's personal accounts to board members' offshore holdings, bribes to sway the vote. Gasps echoed through the feed. The chairman banged a virtual gavel. "Mr. Whitmore, these allegations are serious. We are suspending the hearing and notifying authorities." Ryan's face drained of color as security entered his frame. "This is a setup," he shouted, but it was too late. Police were already at his door. The feed cut as he was led away in cuffs. The board reconvened virtually an hour later, sans Ryan's allies, who were now under investigation. The chairman addressed Claire. "In light of the evidence, your marriage is deemed valid and the inheritance secure. We'll initiate a full purge of compromised members." Claire thanked them calmly, but as the call ended, she collapsed into my arms, tears streaming down her face. We were alone in the conference room, the weight of the past months crashing over us. "I thought I'd lose everything," she sobbed into my shoulder. "The company? You? All of it!" I held her tight, my own eyes stinging. "You didn't. We didn't. Because this is real." She pulled back, looking at me with a mix of relief and wonder. "You saved us." I shook my head. "No, love did. Choosing each other did." In that moment, as I wiped her tears and kissed her forehead, I knew we'd crossed the final threshold. The fire, the sabotage, the hearing. It had all led here. to a truth neither of us could deny anymore. Ryan was gone. The board cleansed, and Claire's position solidified. But more than that, we'd won something deeper. Each other. In the weeks following the hearing, life on the farm began to settle into a new normal, one that felt earned, not imposed. Ryan's arrest made headlines in the financial world. Embezzlement, arson, bribery, the charges piled up, ensuring he'd be out of the picture for years. The board, now purged of his cronies, reaffirmed Claire's leadership without hesitation. She dove back into Whitmore Group with renewed energy, restructuring divisions to prioritize sustainable practices, subsidies for small farmers, adopting eco-friendly tech, partnerships with locals like me for soil health initiatives. It wasn't just business. It was her grandfather's legacy reborn, free from the greed that had threatened to corrupt it. I didn't join the company, never wanted to. The farm was my world, and Claire respected that. Instead, she helped in subtle ways, connecting me with better suppliers for seeds, even funding a small upgrade to my irrigation system through a grant program she'd championed. We blended our lives gradually. Mornings became shared rituals. Her brewing coffee while I fed the cattle, or us walking the fields at dawn, discussing everything from market prices to dreams we'd shelved long ago. The guest room turned into our bedroom, her suits hanging beside my work shirts, a quiet symbol of how far we'd come. There were no more auditors, no prying eyes. The pretense was gone, replaced by something solid and unforced. Challenges didn't vanish overnight. The fire's aftermath meant a lean harvest that year, but we adapted. Claire's connections brought in temporary help from neighboring farms, and I learned to lean on her without feeling diminished. We argued, too. Her late-night calls, interrupting dinner. My stubborn independence clashing with her offers of help. But those fights ended in understanding, not resentment. One evening, after a particularly heated discussion about expanding the farm, she pulled me close and said, "Not just surviving it." It hit me then how much she'd changed me, and how I'd changed her. She laughed more freely now, the weight of her inheritance lighter on her shoulders. And I felt less alone in the vastness of the plains, like the farm wasn't just a remnant of loss anymore, but a foundation for something new. A year later, almost to the day of our courthouse wedding, we decided to make it real, not for a will or a board, but for us. It wasn't extravagant. We held the ceremony right on the farm, under a clear Nebraska sky in late March. No lawyers drafting clauses, no prenups or conditions, just a simple arch of wildflowers we'd planted together the previous fall, strung with lights. Friends from town showed up. Neighbors who'd watched our story unfold from afar, a few of Claire's trusted colleagues from Whitmore, even some small farmers she'd helped through her programs. The officiant was the same judge from our first rush signing, who chuckled about how far we'd come. Claire wore a flowing white dress that caught the breeze, her hair loose with a few strands of hay woven in as a nod to our life here. I stood in a clean shirt and jeans, my boots polished for once. We exchanged vows we'd written ourselves, promises of honesty, partnership, and choosing each other every day, no matter the storms. "You didn't just give me a name on paper," she said, her voice steady as she slipped a simple gold band on my finger. "You gave me a home, a reason to fight for more than just survival." I pulled her close after, kissing her as the sun dipped low, painting the fields golden. The reception was backyard style, tables laden with potluck dishes from guests, a bonfire crackling as night fell, stories shared under the stars. Laughter echoed across the land that had once felt so empty to me. Now, as I look back from the porch where we sit most evenings, watching the horizon swallow the sun, I see how it all unfolded. Claire runs Whitmore with integrity, turning it into a force for good. Subsidies for sustainable tech that even helped me double my yields this season. The farm thrives, expanded but still mine, with her input making it stronger. We've talked about kids someday, a family to fill the house with noise and life. But for now, it's enough. This quiet partnership, born from desperation, but forged in choice. She came to my door, asking for a husband. She stayed because we chose each other, and that made all the difference.